It wasn't until later that I realized what that conference was. Because at the time, it was just an opportunity to go see people and visit and go, go to university. Just, it was wonderful, though. I think he was very prescient in anticipating what actually might happen, what the future might be. It's funny because around the same period of time I was working on my dissertation, and it was a study of the influence of culture on a group of 10 Chicano artists. And I finished it, I think, around 88. I thought that we had reached like the apex. Now I look back and realize we weren't even at mid-career. So those same people, Judy Baca, Carmen Lomascaras, all these people, I see now that when I interviewed them in the 70s, so 83 I finished, in the 70s they were really just beginning. And Califas was that way too. It might have been the end in some way of certain careers, but it was really just the beginning of others. And I think we look back on it now and we see it as a sort of milestone along that road of Chicano art. To understand the Chicano movement is to really understand, in a sense, how people were using language and image to create an alternative identity. Since we'd grown up in America, most of us, I'm like a child of the 40s. So I was in high school, middle school, high school, 50s into the early 60s. So, if you watch Nickelodeon, you'll get it, Donna Reed and Ozzie and Harriet. It was a completely white world. And you knew every day when you left your house and you went out into that world that you just weren't quite right. I discovered the other day by reading on Instagram, of all things, that the first desegregation of Mexicans in California happened in 1948, which was my kindergarten year. And I thought, oh, that's what that was. Because when I was a child, these things would happen. White people might say something, or you'd get this feeling that somehow you weren't supposed to be there. And we think of desegregation or segregation as something that essentially happened in the Black South. But no, it was alive and well as I was growing up. So I think the alternative identity was our realization that we could never be seen as white. And then what were you then? I wasn't Mexican, I wasn't born in Mexico. And I remember asking my mother about it when we were taking civics or something, maybe, I don't know, it was a 10th grade or something. And we were talking about citizenship. So I came home and I asked my mother, am I Mexican? She said, oh, sure, honey, you're Mexican. And I'd say, so I'm not American? She's, you're American, you were born here. And I'd say, so was I born in Mexico too? No. And then we had to straighten it out. And then I came to the realization that I was even different from my parents because they were undocumented. So they had been born in Mexico, but they had no papers. So my entire childhood was like me, a boisterously difficult child trying to behave herself. So I wouldn't cause my family any trouble. So by the time the Chicano movement came, its blessing, its promise was for once in your life, you would belong. You would have your place with all the other people who never belonged anywhere either. And so I remember first conversations comparing notes, grandmother stories. Where are your family from? Oh, Jalisco? Oh, my family's from yada yada. So everything circled around the creation of this other identity, which was neither Mexican nor American. It was in the middle. And so the language, like Califas, consafos, all of those slang terms were like a badge of honor because they gave you. And that's why the indigenous was so powerful in that first generation. That was decidedly you saying, I am not white. Now, you might not have tribal affiliation because in Mexico, the mestizaje allowed for the mixing. I mean, they controlled it, but it wasn't like the US where you were separated out in, certain kinds of spaces and given tribal registry through the BIA. So we never had that kind of touchstone going back, but we claimed it in different ways. So everybody changed their names. There were Xochis and, just everybody had some indigenous name. that's why I switched to Amalia, my middle name, because Maxine is my first name, which is sort of a funny French name to give a Mexican girl in the 1940s, but my mother thought it sounded like a movie star.